La-Mulana 2 now has a Kickstarter. I won't go into my opinions on the matter since I've already done a video on the topic. However, the Kickstarter page presents a lot of new information on the game, and a bunch of shocking reveals from the last game too. So much was revealed in fact that I feel like I have enough information for another speculation video, so let's get into some rousing guesswork. The main plot of La-Mulana 2 starts 5 years after the events of the main game. Due to La-Mulana's collapse, La Mesa has gone under heavy criticism for destroying a major archaeological find, so he has to now go into hiding. The village of the 7th generation of children has lost their purpose and struggle to find new purpose in life, though Zelpid is doing fairly well by turning the entrance of La-Mulana into a tourist hotspot. His livelihood, however, suddenly gets interrupted by monsters appearing at the entrance of La-Mulana despite the ruins being destroyed and Mother being vanquished. The monsters appear to be coming from the ruins of Igdrazil, a set of ruins that were once used as a penal colony and are now a haunting ground of hatred and malice. With this new threat brewing, Zelpid reaches out to the archaeological society that La Mesa and Sean are members of for help. But instead, a woman by the name of Lamisa Kosagi appears willing to help solve the mysteries of Igdrazil. And with that, the adventures of La-Mulana 2 begins. The advent of this new La-Mulana 2 information is interesting because it further perpetuates the notion of opposing sides. One famous tablet in the first game reads, "Where there is man, there is also a woman." And the metaphor extends far beyond what we could have imagined. Though La-Mulana has backside dungeons, Igdrazil is apparently referred to as the other side of La-Mulana. This is interesting to note since Igdrazil is apparently a realm of concentrated evil, while La-Mulana was never really a malicious entity, but rather a place of birth and knowledge. This dichotomy is also interesting because it means if there was a mother, there could also be a father that we had to deal with as well. We could also speculate that since La-Mulana is the origin of life and knowledge, Igdrazil could also be the origin of death and strife. Many zones they tease at in the Kickstarter allude to this idea, but we'll cover that later. The main cast has been relatively unchanged, however 2 characters have caught my eyes in the Kickstarter. The first one, naturally, is Lamisa Kosagi. Lamisa plays the role of the adventurer in this game, further fueling the dichotomy between man and woman from the game's story. If the Kickstarter's information is anything to be believed, however, then the age difference between La Mesa and Lamisa make it very hard to say that they're father and daughter. Oddly enough, the age documents make it easier to believe that Sean might be the father of Lamisa, which would make for an interesting rivalry with La Mesa. Not much else is known about her yet, but this is apparently going to be her first archaeological endeavor, so she might be getting help from old friends. Another interesting character development is Moldbrook. After the fall of La-Mulana, she forfeited her conditional immortality in order to live a normal everyday life. Oddly enough, her definition of everyday life is to become a treasure hunter, using her vast years of historical knowledge to find new artifacts and treasures. This leads me to believe that Nagora is going to make her the alternate playable character for the Kickstarter goal. She already has a pre-established history of wanting to be the main heroine, beating up several women in Rose and Camellia in order to achieve that title. Considering her role in the previous games, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to see her involved beyond the support role as well, since she would have an intimate knowledge of Igdrazil as well as La-Mulana. If she is indeed an alternate playable character, then I would have high hopes that she'll play somewhat like Maria Reynard from Castlevania. La-Mulana 2 is boasting a huge variety of new areas, and the info from Kickstarter is suggesting a heavy Norse influence for the game. The new areas offer interesting insights into the theme of the game, reinforcing the concepts of a male dungeon and more specifically World's End. Interestingly enough, the teaser image alongside several stills in the Kickstarter video suggests that the teaser image is actually a very basic map of Igdrazil. The first of the new zones is named Roots of Igdrazil. This is nothing new, however. In my last La-Mulana 2 video, I discussed the potential of Igdrazil being an origin point and it being the focus of the World Pillar theory. This is further reinforced since Igdrazil's roots are apparently serving as the game's gate of guidance, i.e. the main entrance to Igdrazil and most likely a host to some daunting mid-bosses. Given the specific naming of this area, we can also assume that Nidhogg will be either the guardian of this area or a major sub-boss, and his cronies Hristvelgr and Ratatosk will be in the dungeon as well. The next area introduces Alfhelm, the land of the fairies. One interesting thing to note is that this is apparently where the Fairy King resides. And with the Fairy Queen being teased in another piece of concept art, we can expect some interesting scenarios between those 2 characters. Alfhelm is often referred to in any fantasy story involving Norse mythos. Prominent examples being Odin's Sphere having a land of the fairies though with a different name, and the manga Berserk having Guts headed towards Elfheim if the story would get him off the fucking boat. Given the nature of the fairies, I'm banking on Alfhelm being the area where you get a method of healing while in the dungeons. The next area on display is the Immortal Battlefield, Midgard. Both being rooted in Norse mythos, there seems to be a slight paradox here. The Immortal Battlefield is usually called Valhalla, where mighty warriors spend their afterlife training in preparation for the world's end known as Ragnarok. Midgard, however, is typically known as the Land of Man, seated at the base of Igdrazil. While these two seem at ends, my guess is that this area is meant to be the dumping ground for those not suited for Valhalla, considering the malign nature of Iglana. Vinland Saga has a similar locale, which further hones down the idea of this dungeon being a land consumed by rage and strife. On the note of Midgar's story, the great serpent Jormungandr resides in the oceans surrounding Midgar, so I'm hedging my bets that he'll be the guardian of this area. The final zone in the Kickstarter page is Muspelheim, the Blazing Frost Canopy. This is probably the most confusing of areas. In Norse mythology, Muspelheim is a land of pure fire ruled over by Surt and populated by the Fire Titans. In the La-Mulana 2 information, however, Muspelheim is a land where fire and ice coexist, which is somewhat confounding already. I'm guessing this zone is meant to condense Muspelheim and Nibelheim into one area, meant to serve as a land of titans to offset the giants from the first game. One final thing caught my eye in the Kickstarter teaser. One of the enemies shown off is named Humbaba. This beast is a creature from Mesopotamian history, known as the guardian of the cedar forest where the gods reside. Considering the slight nod of the concept of word pillars and the use of Igdrazil, I'm guessing this is meant to be a clue of what the overall theme of La-Mulana 2 will be. I'm not quite up to snuff on other mythological stories, but I'm starting to think that the icon that I thought was the Great Pyramids may actually be Mount Fuji, located in Japan. For those not in the know, Mount Fuji is often considered a world pillar as well in Japanese folklore. Based on the overall nature of the areas and enemies, I'm noticing that La-Mulana 2 is more about spiritualism rather than anthropology. We've gone from studying the origin of life and are now starting to focus more on the afterlife instead. Ragnarok and some form of Armageddon are certainly becoming a central theme of the game, and I'm genuinely curious on where they plan to take this next. The title of La-Mulana 2 involving 9 and 0 is food for thought as well, since those numbers involve ascension and nothingness in the game's lore. La-Mulana 2 is shaping up to be a very ambitious game. Nigoro certainly knows where they want to go with the game, and I'm very excited to see what they tease us with during the game's development. That's all for this video though, so until then keep your laptop close and your whip closer.